Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to take a look at 20 tips for beginners and intermediates in Logic Pro. The first one, we're going to come up to the top left corner, click on Logic Pro, go to Settings, General, and go to Advanced. And then we want to make sure we have Enable Complete Features turned on. It's going to enable all of these features here. This is designed to make the transition from GarageBand to Logic a little bit easier. I recommend having it on from the very beginning. You paid for the software, might as well use all the features. Make sure this is turned on, and all the tips you see online, they're all going to work a lot better. The next tip is using Command T to trim or cut a region. The way this works is I select a region first by clicking on it. I put the playhead wherever I want the split to take place, and then I can use the keyboard shortcut Command and T, and it will split the region right where I put the playhead. Notice it keeps the second half of the split selected. So if I wanted to come back here and split this one, I'd have to click on this region and then Command T again to split it. If you want to move audio around, if I want to delete this piece, I can hit delete, but I can't do that unless I split it first. So that's the next tip, split regions with Command T. The next tip is pay attention to what you have selected. In this view in particular, this is the mix view. And in the mix view, you can select tracks by clicking on them over here, or you can select individual regions. And notice that when I select a region, it does not also select the track for that region. So if I select this region and then I come over here to do some effects, those effects are applying to this track, the one that is currently selected. So we want to be careful. If I select a track, notice that it selects all the regions on the track. So then if I hit delete, it's going to delete all the regions on the track, but it won't delete the track. So it's very important to be aware of what it is you have selected, and it can be easy to get confused between having a track selected or a region selected. The next tip is using cycle. You can turn cycle on and off by pressing the C key or by pressing cycle right up here. And what the cycle is this yellow bar up at the top, which you can also click and drag to create, and that will play back repeatedly an area of the song. So when you hit play, it will play the same spot and it will just kind of loop it over and over again. Now you can do some different things with the cycle. You can click it to turn it on and off. You can also hit C to turn it on and off. You can click and drag in the middle to move it around. You can trim the ends. If you want to set a new cycle within the cycle that's already on, like if I wanted to cycle from 9 to 11, it's easiest to simply click C to turn it off and then click and drag from 9 to 11. You can also right click the cycle button up here and you can say auto set locators. And this is pretty cool because while the cycle is on, it will cycle over whatever region you have selected. It will also cycle over the marquee selection. So I have the marquee tool set to my command click tool. This means if I hold command and drag over an area, the cycle will automatically follow that area. So you can choose to have the cycle turned on like that, or set it wherever I put it. And remember, turn it on or off with the C key on the keyboard. The next tip is all about using the mixer window. So when you go up into the window menu in the top, you can go to open mixer and you can see the keyboard shortcut is Command 2. So if I press that now, we'll see the mixer window come in. I like actually hitting X on the keyboard and that opens up the mixer in this bottom half. If you drag in the middle, you can make it smaller and you can scroll up and down in this window, and you can hit X again just to close it. For the next tip, did you know that you can easily change many things about many tracks by just selecting multiple tracks? So if I click and drag in the mixer window over a whole bunch of tracks, it selects them all, and I can drag up and down on a parameter, in this case the fader, and it will apply to all of them. It will even allow me to do that if the faders are all in different positions, like this, and I can move one and they will all move relative to one another. This will apply to things like panning. It'll apply to things like sends. It'll apply to all different types of things if you select multiple tracks. So you can select multiple tracks by clicking and dragging. You can click one, hold shift, click another, or you can hold command and you can select or deselect at will, whichever tracks you want, whether they're next to each other or not. And this tip might be a little bit controversial, but I really advocate people to use a set of intervals on the faders when they are changing the faders. It really helps you to keep track of something that you might have moved by accident. For example, if I have a fader set to -1.3, I know I probably didn't put it there because I typically will set everything to 0.5 interval. So it's more likely that I would have set it to -1.5. And you can double click and you can type And I just find if I set everything to 0.5 dB intervals on the faders, it really helps me to stay organized because it's not as difficult as you might think to accidentally move one of these faders. And it's a really easy way to tell if I see something at minus 1.9, I know that I didn't set it there. So that's a quick one. 0.5 intervals. Give it a try. The next tip is Option click something to return it to its default level. So if I move this fader, for example, it's going to be at minus 5.9, but if I Option click it, it will come back to its normal default level, which is 0. Panning, if I have it set to something, Option click, it'll come back to center. This is also true for plugins. If I have a plugin open like this one and I move something around, I can Option click these numbers here to return that to those individual numbers to their default levels. And that's going to be true of all the different parameters across all different plugins all over the whole software. Same with sends. If I have a send set up to some level, if I Option click it, it will turn it back to 0. In this case, it doesn't put it back to the minus infinity, but it will turn it back to 0. So it's a good starting place. Option click, return things back to default levels. The next tip is to use sends to do effects like reverb and delay. These are aux tracks, aux buses, aux sends. People have all different words for them. If I want to add reverb or delay to something, it might be tempting to click the track and come over to the left, audio effects, and add reverb or delay, just like I might add like an EQ or compressor. It can be done this way, but a much more efficient and more advanced way of doing it is to add a send, choose a bus, and then the bus will appear right here for you. This is the auxiliary track that the bus is being sent to, and then I can add my reverb on this track. And what I can do is I can add my reverb like this. I'm sending a portion of this track to this track. And then my reverb comes up here and my dry unaffected signal comes up here, and I can change the ratio. The reason for this is if I come over to some other track, and I want to send this to that reverb, I only need one reverb unit to do that. Okay, I can send it, and then I can have multiple tracks being sent to the same reverb unit, and I don't have to duplicate reverbs across the whole system. So use aux sends for reverbs. Great little tip. While we're on the subject of reverb, next tip, you can play around with presets right up here, and every plugin is going to have a whole bunch of different presets. You can also click these arrows to scroll through the different presets, and it's a great way to start with any plugin. So it doesn't matter if you're using a compressor, an EQ, you can click these arrows to go to the different presets, and sometimes they even have categories like the compressor has drums, keyboard, guitars, voice, and there's just different presets in here. And it's one of the best ways to learn about plugins. Start with the presets, especially if you're new, and then you can modify them from there. It's available on every plugin. And while we're on the topic of presets, you might know that there are also track presets. So you can click on the top left button with a little music note and you can select a track, and then you can go into all of these different areas, and there are presets for a whole track, which if you select it, it's going to put a whole bunch of plugins. It adds buses and auxiliary tracks and all kinds of things like that onto the track. I advise avoiding these. They don't teach you anything about how to use these plugins, and they just make it a little bit messy. You can turn them on and kind of look through them to learn a little bit, but I really advise trying to stay away from them. Try to build your own plugin chain over here as soon as possible when you're learning. Here's a really quick tip. You can scroll in either direction while holding Option. So you can scroll horizontally like this with either a trackpad or a side-scrolling mouse. And you can scroll up or down while holding Option to zoom in and out like this. So zooming vertically and zooming horizontally. It's a really easy way to quickly get around. It's the same as using these sliders in the top right corner, but holding Option and scrolling in either direction is a much faster way of doing it. Give that a try. There are a ton of different tools in Logic Pro, that is things you can turn your cursor into, and they're up here. I have a left click tool, and then I have an option click tool. So I can set my left click tool to something and my option click tool to something. But you might not know that if I just hit T, I can change my tool on the fly right next to my pointer from wherever I am by clicking on these or by hitting the corresponding letter. So if you find yourself using a particular tool all the time, try hitting T and then hitting the corresponding letter, and you can change it. If you want to change it back to the main pointer tool, just hit T and then T again. It will always come back to the pointer tool. Really easy. Here's one I use every single day, Option+Drag to make a copy. So Option, click and drag something to drag a copy of it. I just did it with audio. You can also do it with plugins. If you're in the mix window, you can do it there as well. Option+Drag to copy a plugin from one track to the other. Option+Drag to copy audio from one place to another. Really easy, really quick, very powerful. If you have a whole list of plugins on a track that you worked really hard on, each one of these plugins has its own sound and you got it sounding exactly the way you want it, and you just want to copy this over to another track, I can come up to setting and I can say copy channel strip setting, come to another track and I can say paste channel strip setting, and it will copy not only the plugins and all of their settings, but also pan and volume settings as well. If I want to, I could say paste plugins only, or I could paste sends only. On this original, I didn't have any sends set, but this is another way of just pasting information from one track to another. Very powerful, very fast. If you find yourself wanting to use a particular signal chain of plugins on multiple projects across multiple different sessions, you can come up to setting and you can say save channel strip setting as and give it a name. And now that will be available to you in other projects. You can see I've got some set up right down here. I can come up here and I can say this one, and it will copy all of these plugins over here for me. You can make your own custom channel presets. You can also save custom settings in a particular plugin. So if I load up the tape delay plugin here, it's going to load up the default preset, but I've saved one that I like called 128 milliseconds, and that is my own custom setting for this delay. So you can have custom settings for individual plugins as well. If you find yourself setting one plugin to the same thing over and over and over again, save it. It's available in every project. If you're a little bit new and you've messed around with automation, you may find yourself painted into a corner. You can see on this track, I've enabled automation. And it's going to take control of this track's fader for me. So if I just want to turn this whole track up, I can't really do it. The fader's going to basically be possessed by my automation. But if I hit A to go into the automation view, I have trim right here, and I can trim the entire track up or down, keeping the automation intact. Let's give that a try. In Logic, you can color code regions and tracks, and out of the box, they don't really work together. They're working separately, and it can be a little bit confusing. So if I right click on this track, and I go to assign track color, it will change the track color, which changes the icon color and the color over here. And it also changes the color at the bottom of the mix view over here. And you can see it also changed the region color. You see, as I change color here, it's changing the color of the region. And that is because if I go to Logic Pro in the top left, settings, and then view, and under view, we're going to go into tracks, and we can say region color as track color. And that means whatever color I assign the track, the region follows suit. Makes it really easy to stay organized. And for the final tip, to return the playhead to the beginning of the session, just hit return on the keyboard. Super easy. Return on the keyboard. I use it all the time, and I don't know what I would do without it. So give that a try. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give some of these tips a try. Let me know what you think.